can say if select X is not null, we add the listener. We can do this for each button. If yeah, Copilot's going to fill this in for me. Room. Hands. Sponge. So we're dynamically adding listeners to the buttons that I've assigned up here, which will then point to these functions. When you click the button, it will call the equipment service to switch the weapon. And then, which the service acts as like a middle layer between the two game objects, the menu and the thing on the player. And then it'll close the menu. And then closing the menu shuts the UI down, does the gameplay overlay, turns the gameplay overlay back on, disables the input from the tool selection, and then re-enables gameplay again. So let's try this out. Started open, that's not a good sign. Yeah, that's not a good sign. So I had a null, we had a null exception. Canvas group. I had this problem before. This is because awake, it's calling hide before awake's getting called. Get where that is. Supposed to be doing it on start though. I'm really curious. This is happening on start. But I register. Oh. Base. Is this it? Virtual. There we go. That was the problem. That needed to be protected virtual so that when I go here, I can override. Okay. That was the problem. Because I had I was not calling that because I already had an awake function. This should work. Right, so if I push Q, I can't move, and then the mouse didn't come back. That's fine. If I push 1, no, 2, 3, 4, 5, no, that's not working. Okay, Q, escape. Nope. Okay. Menu came up. These should be registered. When I hit Q, so this. Thank you. It's a pack. I didn't make it. It's a pack that I bought, so I'm not taking any credit for it. I say on tool select. We have to enable input service. Enable that. We're missing that. And that should also turn on the mouse cursor, I think. So I can Q. Didn't turn on the mouse cursor. I still can't move. That's good. And I hit 1, 2. No, it's not. Let me go here. How do I handle inventory? Because that works. And like dialogue. Actually, let me look at dialogue. So on enable input. So I have to go to, let's close this, this. So on enable. Oh, that's why. This should be none. Should actually be tool select. This should be tool select. That's the problem. That's always the problem when using like something like Copilot and it fills it in for you. If you don't review it, it could be wrong. It might functionally work. It might compile, but it might have put the wrong variable name in there or something. So always, if you're using AI assisted code suggestions, maybe double check what it generates. Oh, I think I updated the wrong function. Toolset. Oh, this was correct. I was looking at the wrong function. I stand corrected. I apologize to Copilot, my AI overlord. You generated it correctly. I read it wrong. So here's the thing. Copilot is going to help you be a better coder. Don't think because it recommends things, it's wrong. Don't think that it's going to make you a worse coder. It is going to make you a stronger coder. Now, what I will say is if you're a beginner, I would do it with it off. But before Copilot existed, we still had autocomplete and stuff. So I strongly recommend if you're using an IDE, get used to it being integrated. It's not going away. But if you're more novice, if you're less of a novice and you're starting to get more comfortable, it's only going to make your code better. So, I mean, I've been programming for over 20 years, so I'm comfortable with it making recommendations. And I can understand why you would make a statement like that. But it is a tool that you should learn to use. Because there are right ways and wrong ways to use it too. That's the other thing. And I don't think people realize that like you can use Copilot incorrectly. So use it. Don't just ignore it, but because it's not going away. The genie's out of the bottle. It's not going away. It's only going to get better too. That's the other problem. Okay. So then delete it. Then delete it. If it generates something that you don't understand, delete it. Or even better, ask it to explain it to you. You can do that. Like here, I'll show you an example. So I think it's Control I. No. What is it? I forget how to open Copilot. Control Alt I. Shift I. Control Shift I. Dang it, I don't remember. But you can. There's a way to open the prompt. I think it's like that in VS Code. You can hit a command and open up Copilot. But you can say like, please generate a method to open the tool select overlay. Okay, so it generated one. Open menu, right? Then you can say, you can highlight this and then ask Copilot and say, please explain this to me. So if you don't understand it, ask it. There you go. Look at all this documentation it generated. It will explain it to you. So don't be afraid of it. All right, interfaces or inheritance. I can actually explain that to you right now because I'm using it in my code. So sit down, Strappy, pull up a blanket, pull up a nice cup of tea or whatever. And you're gonna learn about interfaces and inheritance right now because I'm literally using it. So let's bring up this is way too bright for my developer eyes, so I'm switching to dark mode. Okay. So in my game, I have menus. I have my inventory menu. I have my dialogue. I have my crafting, gameplay, and right now I'm working on the tool select. Right? These are all literal UI screens in my game. Now, two of these, or actually most of these, are using the new UI system. So they're visual elements. This is the new UI system that Unity has. But the tool one is a canvas based. These are Unity terms. It's what's really not important what they are like from a Unity perspective, but just know that the way I interact with these are different because they're based on either visual elements or the canvas, right? You don't really need to know what those mean, just know that they're different. So what I want is I want a common way to interact with these so that I can open and close them. Right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a standard language to describe them. And I like to call things overlays. Okay, so these are all overlays. So if you think of a UI as something you're overlaying on top of the screen, that's what I'm talking about. Now, there are common things that I want all overlays to be able to do. In particular, show and hide. I want to be able to show an overlay and hide an overlay. So I'm going to create an interface. And all an interface is a list of functions that is common to all things that implement that interface. And I'll show you an example. So I'm going to create, actually, let me move these to the end here, and I'm going to start on this side. This is my end result. So I'm going to create an interface, and I'm going to call it iOverlay. The reason why I call it iOverlay is that it's a common convention that anything that is an interface starts with the letter I. It's just something you'll see. So if you ever see I something, I damageable, I interactable, I overlay, in this case, it's an interface. It's a contract. And what that looks like is literally this. Okay, I have my namespace. That's just kind of like grouping code. iPod, yeah, iPod. I overlay. All it is a list of functions that will appear if I use this, if I implement this interface, if I put this on a class and say that it is an I overlay, I know, or I'm telling the code, or I'm telling the compiler that you will find these functions on that class. So it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a car in the game or it's an NPC. I can show it and I can hide it. And I don't care how those things are implemented behind the scenes. All I know is I can say, is this an I overlay? Yes, hide, or show. Do you understand that part at least? And typically you don't have to declare public because it's always, but these are always public functions. So they're always available to anyone that's looking at this. Does this make sense so far? Cool. All right. So we know that we can hide and show overlays. But because let me go back to my thing. Because we have visual element overlays and canvas overlays, how you hide and show these things are completely different. In the case of visual elements, you have to actually interact with the CSS, and you have to say things like add class dot hide. I don't know if you're familiar with CSS at all from HTML, but the new UI system uses something called USS, which is very similar to CSS. So I might have a class, a CSS class called show or hide, that I have to apply to the visual element in order to make it fade out or do something. But that's not what I do with the canvas. The canvas, I literally have to access a component called the canvas group, and I have to set the alpha equal to 0. Right? That's how I show or hide. Or in this case, this is how I would hide something. And this is how I would show something. Also, I need to be able to do this from a service. So from something else. So what I do is I create a script over here, and I'm going to call this the overlay service. And so anytime I need to open or close one of these, I need to call the overlay service. So let's say I have a button over here. This is a button. And this button needs to open the crafting UI. In order to do that, in Unity, I need to have a reference to this. I need to be able to say this button call show on the crafting overlay, right? But I can't, if this button is somewhere in the game and it's something that I load, it may not be aware of the crafting thing, or the crafting thing may get loaded later, and I can't have a direct reference to it. So what I typically do is I create a service in between. And the service, when it boots up, when the crafting menu initializes, it registers itself with this crafting service. Then the button can say, find me the crafting service, and call I'm going to say, hey, overlay service, please open the crafting menu. And it will find a crafting menu and open it. Why is this important for inheritance? Well, for starters, for the interface, I'm not going to register crafting and dialogue and inventory and tools and have functions here that say open crafting, open gameplay, open select, tool select, close tool select. I just want to say open overlay. When I register, I can register as an iOverlay, because the only thing that the overlay service cares about is things that are overlays. It doesn't care if you're a crafting menu or a dialogue menu, right? It only cares that you're an overlay, because the only way it's going to interact with you, it's going to tell you to hide or show. Do you follow that so far? So when I'm registering the crafting menu, I'm registering it as an overlay, not as a crafting menu. And it looks like something like this. I use generics. So I have a register function that takes in an iOverlay. I can pass anything in here that implements iOverlay. I don't use singletons. I make this a static class where all the methods are static. You can, although Steph, it's completely fine to make this in a singleton. That's one way of doing it. You can also use the service locator pattern, where this service actually registers itself with some kind of service lookup. And then you say, okay, hey, look up this service. Okay, thank you. I have the service now. Service do something. You could do it that way. Or you can literally make this a singleton and have it right. And singletons in Unity typically have to be on mono behaviors in your scene. So this works outside. This is just a class that exists, and it's floating. And if I switch scenes, the menus unregister and when they get destroyed, and they re-register when they get created. So I can swap scenes around and have the menus register themselves again and stuff. So I prefer this pattern over singletons. So we register all our menus through this overlay, and all I know is that there are overlays here, and I can say show, passing the type of overlay. So in this case, crafting overlay. I look up the type in my dictionary. My dictionary is storing it by crafting and then storing a reference to the overlay. So I say show crafting. I say, okay, what is this type? The type is crafting. Does my dictionary contain a key, which is crafting? If it doesn't, I say, sorry, can't show it. I don't have something that's called that. If I do, I say, okay, get me that and show it. I also have a function where I can get a reference to it in case I have to call other functions on it. Okay, so going back to our thing. So we have this service now. Now, I want to register all these. Now, I could put a register function when these all boot up into each one of these menus and say register, on awake, register with service. And then I can do this, right? Right? But right off the bat, this repetition of code should be a warning sign to you. If you're repeating code in every single class like this, that should immediately tell you, I can do it better. I can do it better. Now, since visual element since these all inherit from some class that now implements the show hide. So now these, actually it should go this way. I decided that, in order to implement a common way of show hide, I don't need to do all this. What I can do is I can create a parent class. This is inherited, right? That is all a visual element overlay. And I can say, hey, all these functions are now here. All these are here. And we have a canvas overlay. Right? And then this one is here. So now the hide, I've only written, before I had these, probably jumped ahead. I used to have like something that looked like this. Where I had this, and I had all these functions over here, and this is what it looked like. Okay, so each one of the classes had a register with the overlay system. But this is a lot of repetition of code, right? So first thing I want to do is start to decrease the repetition. So now what I did is I created these. And rather than having all that code duplicated over here, I now created a parent class that the actual overlays can inherit from. So now I'm dealing with inheritance. And I'm saying that this visual element overlay implements code that all these classes share. So the fact that the dialogue is a visual element overlay, then it also implements, which is, again, this is an eye overlay. This implements eye overlay. These both implement eye overlay. So I have a show and hide, and I've defined what the show and hide is up here. So now all these classes automatically have a show and hide, and they implement the correct way. They either add or remove a CSS class, or they set the alpha to the canvas group. So you're with me so far, Stripey Cat? Are you with me so far with this? You understand how I moved code around, and now I have, so I can show you what this looks like in my code. If I go to UA, so let me actually close all tabs for a second. Close overlays. So we have our eye overlay. We have, let's say, an inventory overlay, which doesn't even have any code in it right now. I haven't even written the code for the inventory itself. It's just a class. But this extends from visual element overlay, which has all this code. Any overlay that extends from visual element automatically gets all this stuff. It has a helper function for get visual element.